Now, the Scottish Government's thinking about banning retailers from sending unsold clothes to landfill. Those plans would form part of a wider ban on the destruction of what's known as unsold durable goods, and it aims to reduce the environmental impact. Let's get the thoughts of Gillian Steele, Creative Director at ReMode, which promotes and works in sustainable fashion in Renfrewshire. Good afternoon, Gillian.
Hello, good afternoon.
Well, the Scottish Government is thinking about this measure in its proposed circular economy bill. What are your thoughts on introducing a ban like that?
I think it absolutely has to come. I mean, there's no doubt about it. We are producing far too much from virgin materials to make clothing. There's an immense amount of clothing around. Charity shops are bursting at the seams with clothes they don't know what to do with. So a lot of that stuff gets sent to countries who are now feeling like, well, we can't deal with this stuff either. Plus, it's really poor quality. So we have to start thinking about our clothes as a valuable resource rather than a problem. So I think this is a move in the right direction, and it's not one that should maybe be being thought about. It should be absolutely happening, and it should have happened by now, really.
Yeah. Do you feel that we shouldn't really have gotten to the stage where the government has to pass a law to stop people sending unsold things to landfill?
Well, that's a kind of age-old argument, isn't it? Whether we allow people to make up their own minds and have common sense, or whether you create rules. And unfortunately, I would be supportive at this stage of saying now we need rules, because I think it's taking a long time to get people to understand the resources that are involved in our clothes. To a great extent, our clothing is kind of invisible as a resource. It's there all the time. You don't see people very often walking down the street naked without clothes on. If you did, it would be a big shock to you. So, our clothes, in a sense, are invisible. We forget they're there, and we forget the resources that go into them. So, yes, we have to, it's time, and it should have happened some time ago.
So the retailers then that this law would potentially affect, what do you think this could force them to do? Donating clothes or recycling unsold clothes, or maybe not making as much?
Well, obviously there's two things there. There's the fact that discard clothing, the excess, needs to be viewed as a resource. And then there's right at the other end where we have to stop taking virgin materials and making new clothes. It's just obscene, the amount of clothes that are being produced per week, per month, per year. We would all need several bodies and to live 100 years to wear all of them. So that's really where the design of clothing, that's where we have to look at how fibres that are closer to hand, not shipped from overseas. And we also have to look at infrastructure being put into place so that garments materials can be pulled apart and made into something else. So I think, there's several things there, but I think the bottom line is we have to stop making stuff. We have to stop taking virgin materials from these planetary resources, taking them and making new clothes, because we don't need it. We've got plenty of stuff as discards, as a resource to continue making lots of clothes as it is.
So your organisation then, Gillian, ReMode, you're involved in partly extending the life of clothes. How easy is it, have you found, to convince people to get out of the habit of thinking, I'll just go and go down to the shop and buy a new top, and I'll maybe wear it once or twice and then maybe throw it in the bin?
Yeah, I think we've got quite a big following, and once people learn and understand the story of clothes, then they get really involved in it. So we've got a shop where we have tokens that you can earn when you bring in clothes that you no longer want to wear. But we really encourage people to try and stop buying, to buy fewer clothes to begin with, and we also encourage them to start looking at how they can mend them. So it's happening in a number of levels.
Right. So mending clothes then, is that quite an easy thing to learn how to do? I'm speaking to someone here who's never. I mean, actually, to be fair, I've made a big effort to buy fewer clothes over the years, so which is quite good. But I wouldn't know how to maybe fix a hole in a jumper or a pair of jeans.
Well, I mean, you'd be amazed at the amount of stuff that, I mean, we get in really beautiful clothes. And sometimes somebody will bring in this beautiful jacket or a coat where a button has fallen off and they said, oh, I don't know how to sew on a button. And it just seems like, well, really, this isn't a very highly skilled thing. And a lot of times people will say, well, I just simply don't have time. So this is a bigger issue also about how we live. And during lockdown, a lot of people got much more engaged with mending and making again, and reaped the benefit from that in terms of feeling that they had some kind of agency. Oh, look, I can make something, I can sew a button on. Cooking was also another thing alongside that. But I think, that's what we are doing at ReMode. We're connecting people to that material value of their clothes in a way in which they actually see the benefits. They get together in a social setting. They start to learn to do something they weren't able to do before, and they enjoy it, and they get a sense of, I'm doing something about climate breakdown, rather than feeling guilty all the time.
And do you think
you really don't want that?
Do you think, Gillian, that younger people are receptive to that idea? Because we're often told that you were told about the kind of the COP26 generation, younger people being more aware of in future climate issues, but at the same time, all these fast fashion, or some of these fast fashion brands, definitely look like they're targeting younger people in their advertising.
I think it's a really hard shout, because I think young people are obviously, they're thinking a lot, they're noticing stuff, and we've got a very strong group of young people in that 11 to 25 years who are really on it and exactly understand what's happening. They also understand that they're being targeted by a very powerful advertising and marketing machinery to get them to buy, even though, they might really, they know the truth, and they know that the best thing to do is to make the clothes last a little bit longer, and that there are good things that come out of that. Much more individuality comes out of that.
But it's hard, Gillian, with the influence of Instagram and everything, isn't it? Because it's this idea that you don't want to be seen pictured in the same outfit twice. But I know some of my daughters and their friends quite often swap clothes quite a lot, which I suppose is one way to make sure they get a bit more wear out of things.
Yeah, I guess, there has to be a whole new way of living and thinking. There are new ways. For example, we do open mic events where young people come along and they're mending stuff, or they're making new garments, but they're also getting up and singing, or they're putting on music, at local music venues. So I think there are just ways of doing this. Swish clothes swaps events are really popular. There's something amazing about picking something off a rail that you really wouldn't have gone to buy yourself, but because you're getting it free because you've swapped it for one of your own, you think, okay, I will try that. And it's actually, there's a real liberation involved in that process. So I think it's about the social aspect of this and how we live our lives, not just for young people, but for all of us, that we find different ways of connecting to try and counter that very powerful marketing machinery that's got us out there buying when we don't need to.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Gillian. Lots to think about there. Gillian Steele from ReMode, which promotes and works in sustainable fashion.